chef, and we will be talking about dining on board. How are you, Pip?
Very well, and yourself?
Very good. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're
Today
welcome.
we are live in the Palm Beach International Boat Show, and we are on board Lady Leah, this 80-foot Lazara Sky Lounge that is for sale, by the way. So, Pip, would you like to tell us a little bit about your background as a chef and how you started working on yachts?
Well, I've been cooking maybe for 25 years now, mainly in restaurants in London. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I thought I need to sell myself out and start making some real money. So I have a friend who's been doing this for 15 years, and he gave me some pointers, and here I am.
Wow, amazing. So how long ago did you start working on yachts?
About 4 years ago now.
Wow, amazing.
So not long.
Amazing. Okay, so now we're going to learn a little bit about what cooking on a yacht is like. So my first question, why do people prefer dining under the yachts many times when they're docked at places that might have very good restaurants?
I think the reason that they do is because they view their yachts as a cozy home, and they like the anonymity of it and the fact that they can have whatever they want. I find in my experience that you'll go to places and they'll want to go off and they'll book tables somewhere, but you can never be sure that they're going to go. You know, so you always have to be on call and have something just in case. And sometimes they'll go out for lunch and be on for dinner, or the other way around. But I think it's mainly because they want to be at home, and their yacht is their special home.
The privacy, right?
The privacy is a big, big factor for yacht owners.
Interesting. Okay, and can you prepare any kind of food on a yacht, or are there any restrictions?
I think it depends on the kind of equipment that you have. Space is always, you have to always think about space. In a galley of this size, I think you'd be challenged really to produce food for more than 6, I'll be honest with you, with the cooking facilities that you have. I mean, you could do anything that the guest wanted, pretty much, to a very high standard. But I think you'd struggle for space to cater for a lot of people.
Okay, but the range of variety of foods that you can prepare is the same as in
Absolutely.
yeah. in the land.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything.
Okay.
No restrictions.
Okay, great. Now, how much time should yacht owners give you in advance before their trip to plan the menu?
I think the kind thing to do is as much notice as possible. I think for a chef on board, you would always know your owner's preferences, and you would probably always have enough just in case there was an impromptu visit. But if you were going on a trip somewhere, I think you might like to know a week ahead.
Okay.
So you can start planning yourself. And again, say in a galley of this size where you might be a bit more challenged and you want to make all your sauces beforehand so that you can freeze them down, you know, and you would probably want a week.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
just to make sure that you had everything perfect.
Nice. Good. Okay. Do you ask all the guests about their food allergies or restrictions before the trip?
I would mainly rely on what the boss knows of his friends, and if you'd had them before, you would have written their preferences down, the guests, and you would know. I think it's always a good idea to have an option for somebody who, say, might not eat meat. You know, you have some extra portions of fish in your freezer, which would be fine. You try to gather as much knowledge as you can, but basically you're cooking for the owners.
Okay.
You know, and if they determine that this is what their menu will be like, I'm afraid that's what guests generally seem to be at the mercy of.
Okay. That makes it simpler for you, right?
It does, but it's also, you know, I think as a chef you want to please all the guests, which is why I'm saying about having, say, an extra portion of fish or something, because you don't want anybody to feel bad, you know, that they're hungry or they haven't enjoyed your lunch, because that's not what you want.
Of course, I understand. Okay, so are there certain foods that are not as good quality or difficult to find when traveling to Bahamas or the Caribbean? And would you have to stock up on those before leaving the US?
I would advise yes. I mean, in the Bahamas you can find some great produce, but it depends where you are, you know. Anywhere that you go, you could go places in the Bahamas that are really remote, and you could be 12 or 18 hours away from the shop. So my advice would be to stock up as much as you can in the US, because again, you've got the variety, and it's also cheaper to do it here because everything in the Bahamas certainly is imported. The Caribbean, I mean, in St. Martin you can get nearly everything. It's fantastic, but again, you're at the mercy of import costs, you know, because everything's flown in.
Yeah.
So if you've got a lot of freezer space, I would suggest that you fill it.
And what would you stock up on? Meat, for example? What
Yeah.
the most important things that people should stock up on?
Meat and fish. I mean, vegetables. It's very difficult with vegetables, and of course berries. That's, you know, every chef's nightmare. I've only got 3 days on these berries. So definitely on all your meats and your fishes, because that's that sort of stress taken off you. You can always top up. I mean, you can look in the Bahamas. You can get broccoli, onions, carrots. You can get everything like that when you can find it. But it's advisable to bring as much as you can from the US. And also what the stuff that you have in your dry store cupboards, you know, because everywhere you go, say for instance in England you'd have a certain type of flour. There's cake flour, and in some countries they just have flour, you know, so whatever you're used to is much better to have in your cupboard.
Of course. So you'll be more comfortable cooking with your own ingredients.
Yeah, because you know how they're going to turn out.
Yes. And talking about the fish, you said it's good to stock up on fish. And my next question is it possible for yacht owners to catch their own fresh fish when they are cruising on Bahamas, for example?
Yes, absolutely. I think that you just have to be mindful sometimes of there are laws on whether you can catch them and keep them, whether you have to catch them and throw them back, and you have to be kind of careful about those laws. But certainly, yeah, it's great. I mean, the fresher the better, you know, when it comes to fish. So if the owners are fishing off the back of the boat and they bring it in, bring it to the galley, and you can have it for dinner.
But you would rather have some in stock in case you don't catch enough, right?
Definitely.
Or if they take them too long and then it's already time for dinner when they get back from fishing, so you have to have something served.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
Okay, so my next question. How long can the supplies you bring with you on board last when you're traveling, for example, on a 100-foot yacht? So if you're bringing supplies and you fill up everything, how long do you think it would last when you're traveling?
Well, look, the freezer stuff, the recommendation is 3 months from the minute you put it into the freezer until it needs to be used. So 3 months quite safely. Fresh produce, again, it's tricky to say because some stuff spoils a lot quicker than others, you know. And I think it depends on your refrigeration space as well, because, for instance, you might have to leave fruit out, and that goes quite quickly because it can get warm in here. I find that the fruit, certainly spoils very, very quickly. You know, bananas can go ripe overnight.
Yeah.
So you have to be kind of careful, you know, sort of some in a cool place, some have to be very creative about where you keep things. But, you know, if you're going away for a month, I think you're good to have everything in the freezers and you'll be safe and happy with that.
Okay, nice. And I guess, because my next question would be, like, how long would your supplies last in terms of running out? But I guess it depends on how many guests you have on board, right?
Yes, and are you offering them one course? Are they wanting meat and fish with every meal? Because certainly some guests like the double protein when they're having family style meals. And again, whether or not they're going to eat out or what will stay in. And also, again, we haven't mentioned this, but you know, what are crew going to eat? That's also another factor in what you can store and use.
Of course. And I was going to, now that you talk about crew, I was going to ask you, do you usually cook for the crew as well, or do they make their own food?
No, you cook for the crew as well. Perhaps if you're really busy, you could say to them, please can you just make yourself a sandwich today? But generally, no, you cook
Okay.
for them as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do they usually eat the same food as the guests and the owners, or do they usually have like their own refrigerator with their own food?
Yeah, I think that the crew certainly has their own refrigerator that's stocked with smoked meats, cheese, yogurts, things like that. But as a rule for cooked meals, you probably end up eating the same sort of things as the owners do. Even though there might be varying budgets, it's a bit, you can't really say, well, this is the boss's chicken from Whole Foods and this is, crew chicken from Winn-Dixie or something like that. That's not really fair.
Yeah, of course. And then it would take you double the time to buy
Exactly.
stuff. Yeah. So
And that is the other factor, is that provisioning. Provisioning is one of the most time-consuming aspects of the job. Once you've got everything in your fridges and you're ready to go, it doesn't matter. But getting to that stage, which is why I say, if the owners can give you at least a week's notice to get sorted out, because it is a stressful thing.
Yeah, of course. Okay, great. So next question. What is the longest you've ever been traveling on a yacht, and how did you manage the provisions?
So probably an Atlantic crossing, maybe 3 weeks, 21 days, 25 days, depending on the weather. What I did was I stocked up with a lot of stuff, obviously in the freezer, and you start out with a lot of fresh vegetables, but I also always buy frozen vegetables as well for the kind of tail end of the trip. It can become quite monotonous for the crew, as you can understand. You can only have really what comes out of the freezers. But you survive.
Yeah, of course.
You get through it.
Of course.
Yeah, so an Atlantic crossing is a long, long crossing.
Yes. But the owners usually don't come with you. It's just
No.
for the crew.
I can assure you that owners do not want to
No.
cross the Atlantic on a yacht. No.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how do you plan for snacks? Do you tell guests where they can find everything in case they get hungry in the middle of the night?
Yes, sometimes the stewardess will have a fridge in their service area that they might have snacks in, but there will always be bowls of biscuits and cookies and crisps, mainly in the salons and sometimes actually in the cabins as well. So they're always picky things for guests to eat. I have also worked on boats where the guests like to have a platter of smoked meats left out for them in the evening that they can just pick at through the night. I've seen that.
Okay.
So again, it just depends on what the guests want. But there's always packaged snacks.
Yeah,
around.
because I thought, when you're a guest at someone's house, for example, you don't know where things are, and
Yeah.
it's a bit awkward, right? So
Yeah.
you make sure that there is plenty of snacks available for
Everywhere.
everyone.
Yeah, everywhere.
Nice, very good. Okay, and I see most yachts have barbecues on them. Are barbecues popular on yachts? And are there any safety issues with barbecuing?
I would say that in general, yacht owners are not the ones that use the barbecues. I'd say if you are on a boat that you have a boat that you want to charter, that's where the barbecue comes into its own. The sun deck can get very hot, and of course when you sit around the bar on the sun deck and somebody's barbecuing for you, it's very smoky and it's very sunny and very hot. So generally, the guests, they might, I might offer them barbecue chicken and somebody will quickly barbecue it for me upstairs and then bring it down and I'll finish it off in the oven and it goes out.
Okay.
But it's not usual that a yacht owner would sit around, at the barbecue on the sun deck and
Yeah.
eat. But it's nice for the flavour.
Okay.
And safety issues, yes, of course there would be safety issues, So there's always a fire hydrant at the ready,
yes.
which everybody knows how to use.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just another aspect, but I would say that it's a trick rather than something that's vital.
Okay. Yeah. So my next question: what kind of menus are the most popular on yachts nowadays? Have you like noticed the trends in dining changed over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. They're changing all the time, and I think that's the biggest challenge as a yacht chef is that, you know, with the best will in the world, I think that there are a lot of faddy diets out there, and a lot of yacht owners and their guests latch on to the different kinds of diets. So now, as a rule, we would, I would say in most of the yachts that I've worked on, certainly, is where you'd put up a plate of food that is a protein and some vegetables, and you always serve the carbohydrate on the side. And you have to be mindful whether or not they're gluten-free, paleo, keto. You know, these are all lots of avocados in the corner. You have to be very mindful always. And I mean, I got stuck once. I think we were in St. Bart's, and the owner had some guests on, and he was leaving at 6 o'clock the next morning, and he wanted some muffins before he went, and he was gluten-free. And it was one of those moments that you think, oh, I can't be caught out. But, you know, so you kind of always have to have in your store cupboards different kinds of flours, different kinds of sugars, so that you can make these things work. Because sometimes you can't just run to the store.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So your dry store, any of your provisions, but your dry store cupboard is got to be packed with mindful produce today.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
You need to be very creative, right?
You do, and quickly
The
think, what have I
planning.
got? What have I got?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And do people usually hire chefs for their yachts only when they're traveling, or are the chefs on payroll like month to month?
Generally, there are two ways of doing it. There's the seasonal position, or there's a permanent position. So your seasonal position would run for the months that the owner wants to use his boat. Generally, that would be, say, for the med season, maybe late April to end of September time. Obviously, this winter season in the Caribbean is shorter. But there are some boats that are dual season. There are some boats that are single season, but the boss wants it fully crewed all the time. It just depends on what the owner's expectation is.
Okay.
I think it's more unusual for say for myself, I'm a professional qualified chef. It would be more unusual to have you on payroll full time. Generally, they would have what they would call a sous chef or a cook on to do crew, because they don't cost as much.
Of course, if they're not using the yacht.
Yes.
Right?
Or sometimes on smaller boats, they wouldn't have a cook at all, and the stewardess would cook. Yeah. So it just depends.
Okay. Nice. And are there any recommendations you could give yacht owners to make the most of their meals on board?
I would say again, it goes back to that giving the chef as much time as they can to prepare. You know, that is the way of maximizing it, and find a chef who loves what they do,
Yeah.
because that always reflects in the food.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much, Pip. So if our listeners want to contact you and ask you any questions about cooking on yachts or about how to hire you, what's the best way to reach you?
My email address is pipsbrennan@gmail.com, or my number is 561-313-8503. Those would be the best ways.
Okay, so I'll have them also on the episode notes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
You're
Pip.
welcome. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks.